Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Sound of Freedom. And this is a new film from director Alejandro Monteverde focusing on Tim Ballard, a man who left his government job and started his own organization to save children and other individuals from sex trafficking. And this film is blowing up. It's making a decent amount of money for a film that's smaller and coming from like a studio like Angel Studios that really isn't a big studio at all. But this film, it's solid. It's definitely too long. At almost 2 hours and 15 minutes, it feels like it drags. And the in-betweens of like the first act, second act, and third act feel like they screech to a halt at times, where it's just like, we had all this momentum, there's an energy here, and then it's like, and if those transitions felt a little smoother, I feel like the pacing would have been better. This could have been a little leaner. But this film, I think, is surprisingly well made. I think for like a lower budgeted film, this isn't like a big studio film. It is utilizing some interesting camera work, and there's some tense moments, some build-up of suspense. And I think that the film, from that technical aspect, and Monteverde, who directed the film, I think does a real fine job. The story-wise, it does... So just to clarify, this film is like inspired by the work of Ballard, but like the actual beats in the film aren't true. Some of them, it leads up to like the second act leads up to this island kind of situation where they set up drug traffickers and capture them and stuff like that. That actually happened, and they show some of the footage at the end of the film. This film feels like it's three very distinct acts that, like I mentioned before, I feel like could have been a little smoother in transition. The third act is completely dramatized because the film utilizes a young brother and sister who were kidnapped from an audition to become like child models and actors, and their story is kind of like the anchor, the emotional anchor of the film. And you see how Ballard really connects with that. His wife Catherine, played by Mira Sorvino, and Ballard, played by Jim Caviezel. They really latch on to that, and it inspires them to go through with it. The story, I think, obviously this topic is important because human trafficking is a very large issue. And I think the film does an alright job of trying to like be honest to the issues, even if it does dramatize like a lot, and like the whole third act turns into like this one man like going out into the jungle to save this girl. And in general, I think the music is very moving. It utilizes a lot of like kids singing, and composer Javier Navarrete is really bringing a lot of emotion into it. Honestly, I think probably the strongest performance in this film is from Crystal Aparicio, who plays the young girl. And the last 10 minutes of the movie are probably the most moving because she really brings a lot to this movie. Because, like, not gonna lie, one of my biggest things with this movie is Jim Caviezel's not great. There's some moments, and I do feel like in those moments earlier in the film that really stand out, I feel like a lot of it's the filmmaking around his performance. But he's so flat and then also completely awkward at multiple moments in this film that kind of took me out of the film, and it was strange. I do feel like the film, especially the second and third act, work a lot better because he's paired up with Bill Camp, who's a fantastic actor and does a really good job in a supporting role here. But tonally, this is a very dark movie and intense movie, and I feel like there's moments throughout the second and third act where they try to inject some humor into it, and it just feels a little awkward. I understand they're trying to give some kind of reprieve, but it just doesn't work. It falls flat, it's awkward. So there are a lot of negatives. There are some positives. It's a decent, well-made thriller, and obviously it has a message that it's trying to get through. You just have to realize, like, this is a dramatization. This isn't really exactly what Ballard did. This story is a dramatization to capture the emotion of what the situation is. The same thing with Clint Eastwood's American Sniper. That's not Chris Kyle. It's a very different character than the man who wrote the biography American Sniper. But I do think that this film works for the most part, and especially with its subject matter, it's heavy. There's some really dark moments, some really uncomfortable moments throughout. But I think in general, it's one of those kinds of things where it's like, obviously this is a problem, and I feel like it's striking a chord with people, and it's finding its audience, and I think its audience are really enjoying it. I thought it was solid, and if this film speaks to you, go check it out. But those are my thoughts on Sound of Freedom. Let me know what you think. Let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.